Let me bring in our guest, Dr. Carol Swain, a former Vanderbilt professor, and Steve Hilton, host of The Next Revolution here on FNC and a Fox News contributor. Welcome to both of you. Good to have you here tonight. You know, you watch some of these games, and Carol, I know researchers say that it does not lead to violent behavior. However, we do know that many of these killers in the school shootings and here as well are people who have been under psychiatric treatment, they've been medicated for it, and they spend 12, 15 hours a day, like Nicholas Cruz was one of them, Adam Lanza, and now this young man gaming. What do you think?
I think that playing those violent video games clearly influences behavior, and we know that in the military they sometimes use video games as part of the training to break down people's inhibitions, and so there's no way that our children are not being affected by violent video games and movies that they watch. And all of this, these random shootings, I think it's evidence of a breakdown in morality in our society and people not really understanding right from wrong.
Yeah, I mean, you know, again and again, you hear that these things have no impact, and yet we see, Steve, as I mentioned, that there are connections in some of these killers. I just want to share with everyone at home, on average, young gamers age 18 to 25 spend an average of 3 hours and 25 minutes a week watching other people play video games, and this is $1 billion business. Some of these individuals who are playing these games for other people to watch in this venue, they want to put them in football stadiums in the near future. These kids and these young people who are doing this make millions of dollars, the big winners. So there is a lot at stake here. Some people hire coaches for kids as young as 14 years old to coach them into becoming these kind of pro gamers. This is a world that I think people need to understand a little bit more about, Steve.
That's exactly right, Martha. This is a huge part of our culture. If you look at the whole industry, it's bigger than the movie industry, and think how much that's a part of our culture, and we all understand it. This is something that if you're not in it, you don't really see what's going on. I completely echo what was said earlier. There's evidence now from neuroscience. I looked into this when I was working in the government back in the UK many years ago, and I was very concerned about this and its impact on society. And the top neuroscientists now can actually show that extended exposure to these video games with all the overstimulation that comes with the games, the loud noises and the colors and the bangs and all of that, it literally rewires your brain, and it makes it harder for children who are doing this to control their emotions. That's exactly what is a factor in these things, because what it leads to is over responding to a slight or to some kind of situation that if you didn't have this stimulation you could let it go. You over respond, so it leads to conflict and violence in the real world.
Yeah, so how do you wrap your arms around this, Carol? Because this young man obviously, I mean, it would appear, I should say, not obviously, but he turned this video game into real life. He was angry, and he took guns that he had brought with him to the venue and killed 2 people.
I think that not only are parents failing, but I think schools and universities are failing because we are not teaching young people just how to behave responsibly. And many of them act as if the world revolves around them, and we have treated them in such a way we're trying to insulate them from anything that would make them feel uncomfortable. And being alive and being part of the world, you're always going to run into things that make you feel uncomfortable. Winning and losing, that's part of life. People that care about their children need to expose their children to situations where if they compete and they lose, they're able to accept that, but they have to understand that it's not about winning all the time.
Yeah, and people get sucked into these. I'm sure that I'm going to get some complaints from people who think that games are the greatest thing since sliced bread. But Steve, I happen to think that being outside and running around in the fresh air and playing baseball and football and other sports is probably better for young brains.
Exactly, and there's evidence of this. It's not just common sense that we've known for forever, but before we had all this technology, there's actual evidence now. And I completely, again, echo what was said. Such good, sensible advice there. But I think we can go further. I mean, look, when we think of other risks to children and their health, for example, smoking, we actually take action and we ban those things for young people. And I think that there's a role for that now, for things like overuse of smartphones and games. We can step in and say, this is not supposed to be how kids should be raised. And we
you're
do
so
something
right.
about it.
You know, I think people used to smoke cigarettes at 13, 14 years old. Now you've got people using this stuff all day long at those young ages. And I think there's going to come a time in our society when we look back and say, can you believe we let kids play those games for hours and hours in their cars, in their bedrooms, in the basement? Something we really need to wake up to. Thank you very much, Carol Swain, Steve Hilton. Great having both of you with us tonight.
Thank you for talking about it, Martha.
Thank you. You bet. We will.